Hey guys and gals, it's 20 degrees here in North Pole, Alaska, so we get to do this. So I'm out here clearing off the deck of a lot of snow, as you saw. Good times, good times, good times, I tell you what. So today's message may be hard for some and a heart opener for others. But what I want to do is just give your heart peace and to remember your calling in life. There's a kind of weariness that it doesn't come from doing wrong, but from doing right without resting rightly. See, it's the exhaustion of a life spent pouring, teaching, caring, answering, leading, and yet somewhere beneath it all, something sacred has been neglected. If you are a pastor, an evangelist, an apostle, a teacher, you already know how to give. That's not your struggle. You've trained your spirit to respond when others are in need. You've learned how to pray when you don't feel like praying, how to speak when you are empty, how to stand when others are falling. You become a vessel that pours, but somewhere along the way, a subtle lie began taking root. I'm always giving out, so I must be okay. Sounds harmless, doesn't it? It even sounds noble, but it's deeply dangerous because giving out is not the same as being filled. You can speak truth and still be starving for it yourself. You can preach about peace and not feel it in your own chest. You can counsel others through storms while quietly drowning in your own. You can become so fluent in the language of faith that no one realizes your own heart has slipped into a low, quiet unbelief, not a denial of God, but a distancing from his nearness. Low faith doesn't always look like rebellion. Sometimes it looks like routines. It looks like opening the word only to prepare for a message, not to be transformed. It looks like praying in public with fire, but in private with fatigue. It looks like knowing what to say to everyone else, but no longer knowing how to sit still long enough to hear what God is saying to you. And the tragedy is this: you can keep functioning like this for a long time. Ministry can continue. Sermons can still move people. Lives can still be touched because God in his mercy will still use a willing vessel. But all the while, the inner life begins to thin out. The well is not being replenished, only drawn from. And eventually something starts to crack because God never designed his servants to live off the overflow of yesterday. We fall into this place because giving becomes our identity. Being needed becomes normal. Caring becomes expected, and without realizing it, we begin to substitute activity for intimacy. We stop receiving. It's not intentionally. It's not rebellious. It just gradually happens. We forget how to sit at his feet without an agenda. We forget how to open the word and let it read us instead of us dissecting it for others. We forget that before we were ever called to lead, we were called to abide. And here's the truth that cuts deep if we let it. You cannot give people what you're no longer receiving from God in fullness. You can give them knowledge, you can give them structure, you can give them experience, but the life, the weight, the presence that only flows from being with him. There's a difference between speaking about living water and actually drinking it. And many in ministry have become experts at describing what they themselves have not tasted in a long time. This is where the faith begins to erode in a subtle way. Not in doctrine, but in dependence. You still believe in God, but you're no longer leaning on him the same way. You've learned how to function, how to respond, how to lead, even when your soul is tired. And so you keep going. But Jesus never invited us into a life where we are constantly pouring without ever being filled back up. He never said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you more responsibility." He said he would give you rest. Not surface level rest, not the kind you get from a day off, but soul level rest. The kind that restores identity, renews strength, and recenters your heart in Him. The problem is, rest requires something that constant giving resists. Stillness. And stillness feels unnatural when people are depending on you. But here's the reality we have to confront. If you don't learn to receive from God again, you will slowly begin to minister out of depletion instead of overflow. And depletion always distorts something. It distorts how you see people. They start to feel like demands instead of souls. It distorts how you hear God. His voice becomes faint under the noise of constant responsibility. It distorts how you see yourself. You begin to measure your worth by what you produce instead of who you are in Him. And eventually, even your love can begin to thin. Not because you don't care, but because you are tired in a place that sleep cannot and will not fix. God is not asking you to stop giving. He's calling you back to receiving. Back to being a son or daughter before you are a servant. Back to being a disciple before you are a leader. Back to being one who sits with Him before you stand before Him. Because the kingdom does not advance through exhausted vessels trying to hold themselves together. Never has, never will. It advances through lives that are rooted, filled, and overflowing from a real, ongoing encounter with God. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to feel guilty for stepping away from the constant demand of others to sit with Him again. In fact, refusing to receive from God is not strength. It's slow disobedience wrapped in responsibility. The same Jesus who called you to serve is the one who calls you to come away, to close the door, to quiet your soul, to let Him speak to you, not as a preacher, not as a leader, but as His. Because you were never meant to live on what you give. You were meant to live on Him. And from that place, not striving, not performing, not surviving, you begin to give again. But this time it's different. It's not forced. It's not draining. It's not hollow. It is overflow. And overflow doesn't run dry. Never does. Shalom, shalom, guys. And as always, love you. Be blessed to be a blessing.